What's happening, YouTube? Champion 2D Rob here, back again, and haven't done this in a minute. I thought I would just come back and do a video response. I've noticed there's been quite a few video responses that have been doing the rounds, and I was tagged to do one, which is not going to be this video. I'll do that soon. But James, Retro Import Gamer, he put out a video last night, and it just got me thinking. It got me wanting to talk about the subject, so I thought I would start off doing a response to his video. And essentially he was talking about retro versus modern, and what his preferences are, and why he favors one over the other. And he sort of encouraged people to make video responses and drop their thoughts on what they think about retro games and modern games and stuff like that. And I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be thinking, oh, here we go, he's just gonna shit on modern games, and he's gonna go on about how great the old days were because he's an old man and all that. But that's actually not what I'm going to say. I actually do very much enjoy modern gaming. I don't have as much hang-ups about modern gaming compared to some other people that I know, including James. Even though, James has said it himself, he does like modern games. It's just that he tends to find that for him, a lot of modern games just don't really appeal to his own sensibilities, which is fair enough. But for me, I pretty much sit 50-50, or maybe 60-40 in favour of retro. I do tend to favour more old school 2D side-scrolling games, pixel art based games. When I do go for AAA modern games, I tend to favour third-person action titles. So games like Uncharted or The Last of Us or Tomb Raider, like those games are what appeals to me. Or Grand Theft Auto, games of that nature. Those are what I tend to go for. What I tend to avoid is a lot of shooters. First-person shooters don't really do it for me. There are exceptions, of course, that I do enjoy, but generally speaking, a lot of these shooters, and the less said about these big, massive online arena shooters, the better. Like, don't even get me started on those. But like for the most part, like I do very much enjoy modern gaming. It just depends on the games, Unfortunately, this current generation has been very disappointing. I have a PS5, although I've yet to open it. That's another story. But I have been quite disappointed by this gen. I have been a PlayStation man since the PS1, and I've never really been let down by their software. But this generation, I have to say, I've been very disappointed. Just not been a lot of games. Don't get me wrong, what I do have for the system, I think are great games when I get around to them. But I just don't think there's enough output out there, which, by the way, I'm in no rush either. I'm not trying to tell them to start making more games because, as I said, I've not hooked up my PS3. I guess some of you will need some context for that as well, so I'll just quickly tap on that. So essentially, I bought a PS5 because my PS4 pretty much died on me. The only reason why I have not hooked it up is just because a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't get a lot of time to play games. And when I do play games, I generally stick to the Switch. So I've not to stick to the Switch. So I don't have an urgency to stick on my PS5. And two, I don't currently own a 4K TV, and I wanted to experience my PS5 for the first time in the best possible way. But unfortunately, there's been some setbacks in getting myself my 4K TV. I've just had to allocate those funds to other things. So it just sort of put that back further and further along, and of course that's just delayed me playing the PS5. I may actually just have to start just hooking up and just play it on my current TV. So that's probably what I'm going to do in a little while. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, so I pretty much enjoy both pretty equally. Of course, it was one thing that James touched on as well, where he was saying that he is very much of the purist. You know, he likes to have CRTs. He wants to have all his original consoles hooked up. He's not against having modern consoles, you know, for convenience sake to play some retro games. He's not against that. He's not against emulation. He's definitely down for all of that. But he just prefers to have all the OG systems hooked up to CRTs. And I completely get that. If I had the space and the money, I would definitely do that as well. But even if I did do that, I would still have a lot of modern systems to play retro games. Like I own the analog systems to play. You know, I've got an analog pocket. I've got the analog ST, and the analog the Mega Drive version. I forgot what it's called now, and the Super NT. I have them. I like playing them. Playing my Super Nintendo and Mega Drive cartridges on those systems for a couple of reasons. One, I can just hook it up to the TV and it's automatically upscaled. I don't have to use an upscaler. And two, it's region free, so I can play games from all systems. I don't have to mod an original system. There's one thing I've always not been a fan of doing, and that's basically like modding original consoles. I don't know why. I guess that is the purist side in me, is that I have a problem, you know, gutting my Mega Drive and my Super Nintendo and putting a region free switch on it and 60 hertz and all of that stuff. I'm not totally against it, but it does make me a bit uncomfortable. I won't lie. So that's why I like these analog consoles, because it allows me to play games from all regions without any of these issues. So so you know, for me, a lot of the modern stuff is just a lot of the modern system, should I say, to play retro games just really comes down to convenience. It's a great way to experience all these old games without having to set up like old consoles and stuff like that. It's really, you know, it's really just down to practicalities, and that's what it is. And in terms of modern gaming specifically, another thing that James touched upon was that he doesn't really mess with a lot of new sort of modern retro titles, and it's not because he's not interested in them. It's mostly because he's a physical collector like myself. But what he's not willing to do is deal with these small print companies like Limited Run, Strictly Limited, etc., and have to wait, you know, a year to get his game. And that's what he can't be bothered with, and that's why he doesn't really deal with a lot of modern retro titles. He does download a few, but because he is a collector at heart, he also collects physical media. He wants to own them physically. That's where part of the joy is. And if you can't own it physically, it's hard for him to get into that stuff. And I completely understand that. Although I am willing to go through these companies to get these games. It's not something I necessarily enjoy doing, but it's a necessary evil. It's not much we can do about that. But through these modern retro games, I've been loving it. I've been absolutely loving it. There's been some absolute gems that have come out for the modern systems that are, you know, are love letters to stuff from the past. You know, things like Blazing Chrome and Steel Assault really comes to mind. Those games just bring me back to titles like Contra 3, because I was a big Contra fan during the 16-bit era. So I love games like that, and games that are made by people that also grew up with the same games that I did. So they make all these homages to these classic games, and they've been knocking it out of the park. There's been some absolute gems that have been coming out. So that's what keeps me going in terms of this modern era, for the most part, because the other thing about this current gen is that a lot of these AAA titles are starting to become few and far between. You know, a lot of these game budgets have just skyrocketed, and it's gotten to a point now where a lot of these companies just can't afford it. You know, these games take a very long time. They're very costly, so it's hard for them to really get back on their investment, because there's no guarantee their games are going to be a hit, and they'll spend years, you know, sometimes up to 7 years, 8 years developing one game. you know, to possibly lose money. I mean, like I was just reading the other day about the online shooter Concord. You know, that game took 8 years to develop. You know, big budget, and it's now been taken off the shelves because no one wants to buy it. No one wants to play it. You know, I mean, again, that's a topic. That's a different topic. But essentially, it just proves the point that for a lot of these developers now, a lot of these big expensive games that take a long time to make are now a big risk, and that's why they're not making them as much now. And unfortunately, it's meant that a lot of the consoles today, the game output is really slowed down, and it's really been the indie scene that has really kept current gen gaming alive. Which is great to see. It's great to see like a lot of games that go back to the old school sensibilities that are thriving. But unfortunately, a lot of the AAA titles now they're just not coming out as much anymore. And what's really happening, we're getting a lot of AA titles and just sort of a lot of medium to low budget titles that are coming out on modern consoles. And don't get me wrong, some of them are good games, but the thing is that they're not really pushing the system, not challenging the system. It's hard to justify getting a PS5 when the vast majority of these titles can run easily on a PlayStation 4. So there's no urgency to buy the system either. So that's really become the issue with this generation. And for me, I mean, never say never, but I don't know if I'm going to even jump into the PlayStation 6. And if I do, I don't think I'll be going physically for it because I just don't really see the point. I have bought a few games for the PS5, but I'm actually being very careful about what I buy for the PS5. I'm not actively collecting for the PS5. I'm just buying a few titles that I'm interested in, but I want to try and keep it small. Probably not past 20 games. I want to keep it from 20 up to about 20 titles initially, because I don't need to buy much indie titles for it because I sort of have my Switch for that, for those indie games. But I kind of want to keep my PS5 for a lot bigger titles. So that's basically my goal with the PlayStation 5. But as far as retro modern, yeah, I love both. I enjoy both. They both have their place for me. I'm very much someone that just appreciates gaming as a whole. But, you know, when it comes to, I mean, even with retro games, I have my preferences as well. You know, I'm a big side-scrolling fan. I love 2D fighters. I love 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups. That's really where my heart is. Beat-em-ups, action side-scrollers, and 2D fighters. That's really where I'm at. So a lot of the modern retro titles that appeal to those sensibilities, that's what I tend to go for. But yeah, so that's basically it. That's basically my 2 cents. And thank you very much, James, for putting the question out to the community. And I'll leave it at that. Take care. Bye-bye.